This lady isn't part of our family. These days, I feel like my son just can't stand me. He's always cold to me, and whenever he talks to me it's like he's looking down on me. Last year, I married a man who was a company president, but he already had a son from his previous marriage. It seems like he just can't accept me as part of the family, and I've come to resign myself to his attitude. Somehow, I was enduring it, but then we decided to get married, and it was decided that the four of us, including his wife, would live together. However, my stepson continued to hurl cruel words at me. From now on, the only people welcome in this house are Dad, my wife, and me. That unrelated old lady should just get out. As soon as we moved into the new house, my stepson quickly told me to leave. I didn't respond with sadness or surprise, but calmly told him, "Okay, I understand. So, are you the one being transferred?" Hearing this, my stepson looked at me as if he didn't understand what I was saying, his mouth and eyes wide open, looking incredibly foolish. Seeing that he didn't understand anything, I decided to carefully explain my identity to him. Minutes later, while imagining what his reaction would be, I spoke. "My name is Gina Manning. When I was younger, I started a company and worked hard to make it profitable and grow it. I would go to work early in the morning and not leave the company until late at night. I worked through the weekends, hardly taking any days off. Because of this lifestyle, my living rhythm started to clash with that of my former husband. We stopped talking entirely for days on end, and eventually, we got divorced. For a while, I couldn't even think about remarrying. I just kept working. However, as my company grew and performance stabilized, I decided to switch to remote work. With more flexibility in my life, I started to think about things other than work, and last year, I got remarried. My partner is an older man named Henry, also divorced. Henry and I have a lot in common. Though on a different scale, he too runs his own company. Sometimes, we consult each other about work. Now, I prioritize my life with Henry. On our days off, we often go out together or relax at home. I don't have any stress with my husband, but his son has been a source of worry for me. Henry has a 28-year-old son from his previous marriage. His name is Peter, and he works at Henry's company, potentially to become the future president. Since Henry and I met, Peter had been living on his own, so we didn't see each other much. The first time we met was when the three of us went out to eat to announce our marriage. "Peter, this is Gina, my new wife. Nice to meet you." Even as I greeted him, Peter stared at me coldly and didn't move. It wasn't just a lack of interest in his father's remarriage, his eyes were filled with hatred. I remember wondering if I had done something to offend him as he deliberately sighed loudly. "Come on, Peter, introduce yourself properly." Peter Manning. After being admonished by Henry, he finally introduced himself after a long pause. I wondered if we could get along. There was anxiety, but I tried to think it was just the tension of a first meeting. However, even a year after the marriage, the distance between Peter and me didn't close at all. In fact, it was getting worse. At any gathering set up by Henry, Peter and his father would try to have conversations as if I wasn't there. Looking back, that was still somewhat endearing compared to what happens now. Every time we meet now, he insults me. "Hey, you're just after Dad's money, aren't you, you sillet? I don't want to think of someone like that as family, so why don't you just disappear?" I never had the slightest notion. I was attracted to Henry's personality and married him for that reason. No matter how many times I tell him, Peter just won't listen and keeps calling me names with a smirk on his face. Henry has tried to address his son's behavior, but any change is only momentary before he reverts to his cold demeanor. Moreover, Peter has been spreading negative rumors about me. That woman is a scammer after Dad's money. Seriously, the worst. I don't want to think of her as a mom. Although few believe his words, every time I meet someone who knows him, they look at me with sympathy. Now, Peter is getting married. He wanted to introduce his fiancée to Henry, so a message arrived to arrange a meeting. Given Peter's feelings, I thought he wouldn't consider me family and would only introduce her to Henry. However, to my surprise, I was also invited to the meeting. Just being included made me feel acknowledged as part of the family, and I was genuinely happy. I was looking forward to meeting the bride-to-be with anticipation. Nice to meet you. My name is Ashley Irving. I am in a relationship with Peter. The woman Peter brought, named Ashley, was beautiful and carried herself with dignity. As she bowed, her smooth hair gently fell over her shoulders. She had a lovely personality, and both Henry and I were overjoyed to have such a wonderful person join our family. However, I have a secret that I've kept from both Henry and Peter. Ashley and I already knew each other. Throughout the meeting, she occasionally glanced at me, as if asking whether it was okay to reveal our relationship. I subtly shook my head, asking her to keep it a secret, and it seemed my message got through, as she didn't mention our connection. Sometime after Peter and Ashley's marriage, Henry became ill and was hospitalized. The doctors said he would have lasting after effects and would need care even after leaving the hospital. "I'm sorry for causing trouble," Henry murmured weakly from his hospital bed. "It's not trouble at all," I reassured him, holding his hand and telling him it would be okay. "I'll take care of the caregiving." "No, Ashley and I will do it." "Dad, leave it to us," Peter interjected, overlapping my offer while we were in the hospital room. "Is that so?" "Thank you." Henry was pleased, so I let out a relieved sigh. Of course, I planned to actively participate in the caregiving as well. Thus, it was decided that the four of us would live together, and we opted to buy a new, spacious house with multiple rooms, ensuring it was designed with accessibility in mind. During the busy time of preparing to move, "Gina, may I have a moment? There's something I want to discuss with you." Ashley reached out to me with something serious. Her voice sounded troubled, conveying her deep concerns. What she told me was shocking. I decided to investigate to confirm the details. And so, the day came for us to move into our new home. The exterior was white, standing out beautifully against the blue sky. With a spacious parking area and a lawn, it seemed like it would be comfortable to live in. Unaware of Peter's plots against me, I admired our new home. Entering the spacious interior from the entrance, Peter started a conversation, saying he had something to discuss. Furniture had already been moved in, and he began to lay out something on the large living room table. They were photos of me. In them, I was arm in arm with a man who wasn't Henry, appearing to be in an intimate relationship. The photos seemed to capture scenes of infidelity, such as being in a busy street and entering a hotel. However, I had no recollection of this. "You're cheating, aren't you? Here's the proof, so don't think you can talk your way out of this." With a smug look on his face, Peter snorted confidently. But there wasn't a shred of truth to this so-called evidence. I silently waited for him to continue. Regardless of my reaction, Peter kept accusing me. He seemed to revel in the feeling of taking down a villain, looking quite self-satisfied. "So it's true, isn't it? You were only after Dad's money, it was never about love. That's why you started messing around with another man as soon as he was hospitalized. Dad would be heartbroken if he knew, wouldn't he?" Haha. It's astonishing how smoothly such words can come from him. I was almost impressed by his acting. Someone who cheats like this isn't family. Starting today, it's going to be just Dad, Ashley, and me living here. The cheating old lady should just get out. I see, understood. Well then, you're the one who will be transferred, please. Right after Peter let out a loud laugh, I sharply retorted, and his expression crumbled instantly. He was utterly baffled, with his mouth agape and eyes wide open, looking incredibly foolish. Surely, a whirlwind of questions must have been swirling in Peter's mind. First, the fact that I, who usually addressed him by name, had called him you. And then, the sudden order of a transfer. For me, this wasn't sudden at all. I had anticipated that he would eventually tell me to leave. What are you talking about? You're not my boss, so even if you say transfer, it doesn't bother me at all. Actually, I happen to be your superior. I decided to explain carefully to him, as he seemed clueless. In fact, my company is the parent company of Henry's company. Although I didn't want to establish a hierarchical relationship between us as a couple, technically, that makes me his superior. Therefore, Peter, who was working at his father's company, also became my subordinate. I had planned to inform Peter of this earlier, but given the status of our relationship, I doubted he would believe me if I told him from the start. So, I had decided to wait for the right moment. No, what? That's ridiculous. As expected, Peter couldn't believe it and started to panic. His smile vanished, and his face was covered in sweat. Ah, don't get me wrong, the transfer isn't based on personal feelings, okay? There's a good reason for it. It seemed he wanted to argue, but instead he just bit his lower lip in frustration as I preempted him. You see, as soon as Henry was hospitalized, you started misusing company expenses, didn't you? And around the same time, there's been a spike in employees complaining about physical distress. What's that about? Peter remained silent, looking down. And these photos are doctored, aren't they? As I pointed this out while he remained silent, he bowed his head even deeper, as if to affirm it. His face wasn't visible, but his ears turned bright red, likely from the shock of being caught and the embarrassment of it being brought out in the open. The sound of the front door opening interrupted us. Peter looked towards the sound as if seeking salvation, and Ashley appeared. By the way, the reason this came to light is because Ashley consulted with me about it. Actually, she works at my company, serving as my dedicated secretary. When she was at Henry's company for work, she witnessed Peter yelling at other employees unreasonably, grabbing them by the collar, and persistently touching female employees' faces and hair. The consultation I received from her recently was about this matter. Of course, I didn't judge based solely on her testimony. I conducted an investigation and confirmed the facts. Peter had been exploiting his position as the president's son to prevent other employees from opposing him. When colleagues who had been promoted before him tried to address his behavior, he would shout them down, making it impossible to have a proper conversation. Other employees treated him like a hot potato, which Peter misinterpreted as respect. This led him to believe he could do anything he wanted, and he began attacking other employees in secret. Following Henry's hospitalization, Peter felt even more unrestrained. It's useless to report me to anyone. You know my dad is the president, right? He had been using such statements to intimidate those around him. I made sure to inform Henry about his misdeeds. I can't believe I was unaware of what he was doing. How much harm he must have caused our employees? Henry seemed to regret his ignorance, covering his face with his hands and muttering apologies. When I proposed Peter's demotion, Henry readily agreed. Lies. There's no way Dad approved my demotion. Peter could no longer sit upright and collapsed to the floor, kneeling. Ashley and I looked at him with the same indifference one might give a pebble on the roadside. Ashley, you'll follow me if I'm demoted, right? You'll stay with me forever, right? I cannot be with someone who looks down and attacks those around them. Please, let's get a divorce. Ashley decisively rejected Peter's plea. It turned out that Peter, not I, would be the one leaving this house. After filing for divorce, they became complete strangers to each other. Rumor has it that Peter is now working in a challenging environment. His status as the president's son doesn't mean anything there, and he's being strictly mentored by his superiors. I thought we could finally live peacefully, but Ashley seemed distressed. Day by day, the frown on her forehead deepened, and she appeared to be in great agony. What's wrong? Did something happen? I was shocked by what she revealed. Apparently, Peter had been contacting her daily. There were over 10 missed calls and more than 50 messages. While showing me her smartphone, the notification count for her messaging app kept increasing. Give me the confidential information from your company, you must know it. I thought he might be asking for a reconciliation, but there wasn't a single message related to that. Almost all the messages demanded information about the company. However, responding to such demands was out of the question. Ignoring the messages or replying that she couldn't divulge any information only led to more persistent contacts. Ashley had become terrified of even looking at her smartphone. This situation couldn't be ignored. If we leave things as they are, it could lead to serious consequences. I decided to consult Henry about it. What is he thinking now? After reviewing the messages, Henry grunted. He crossed his arms and furrowed his brow in thought. Considering he's my son, I've been lenient, but we may need to consider firing or disowning him. His determined expression naturally made mine harden as well. As a last warning, we called Peter in and advised him to stop contacting Ashley. We made it clear that if things worsened, he could be fired. Peter's expression was smug, as if he didn't take us seriously. He wasn't looking at us, but somewhere else entirely, showing no interest in listening. He even became defiant. Shut up. Do you want to know why I'm doing this? Revenge. Revenge? What did he mean by that? Henry and I exchanged puzzled looks and listened to what Peter had to say. Henry's previous wife, Peter's mother, died when he was young. Peter vividly remembered how she always seemed to be scolded by Henry. In young Peter's eyes, his father was a frightening figure, and his mother was pitiful. Dad was always strict, saying not to spend money or go out. I felt so sorry for Mom. And then, Peter's mother passed away. The reason was drunk driving, but he was convinced that it was because Henry had driven her into a corner. The stress increased her drinking. That's why she ended up driving in that state, leading to the accident. In his mind, it was all his father's fault. That's why I swore revenge, planning to take Dad's wealth. And then you showed up. He was cold to me all this time because I was an obstacle to his revenge. That's why he tried to drive me away. Henry stepped forward before me. You're greatly mistaken. It might sound like an excuse to you, but... With that preamble, he began to tell the truth. His former wife was reckless with money. Despite being a housewife, she never did any housework and would freely spend Henry's salary on various purchases. Moreover, she was unfaithful, repeatedly engaging in infidelity. Henry had tried to discuss and request improvements numerous times, but she never changed. Thinking it might be impossible to continue, Henry considered divorce, and then she died in a drunk driving accident. It's pointless to speak ill of someone who's no longer here. What's important is the future. Wanting Peter not to end up like her, Henry decided to raise him strictly. Perhaps Peter resented this. Not only was his mother treated strictly, but he thought Henry intended to stress him out as well. Their relationship remained strained. Peter treated me terribly, trying to drive me out and take Henry's wealth. What was all my effort for then? Peter slumped down, overwhelmed. I could only watch his back in silence. You're an adult now. Trying to drive Gina out and planning to take my wealth were your ideas, weren't they? It's your responsibility. It was clear Peter wanted to blame his actions on anything but himself. I'm disowning you. You won't inherit anything from me, Henry declared, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. Peter, lacking the strength to stand, crawled towards Henry but stopped and remained motionless. Henry stepped back, realizing Peter wouldn't listen to him anymore. Instead, Peter turned to me, crawling on the floor and then grabbing my ankle. I felt goosebumps spread from where he touched me. I tried to shake him off, but his grip was surprisingly strong. "Please, let me work at your place." "Can't you do that for me?" "Of course not." "Why would I?" His attitude seemed shamelessly brazen, considering how he had treated me up until now. When I expressed my refusal, he finally let go. I quickly moved away to stand beside Henry. And then, it was declared. "You've been persistently threatening Ashley for confidential information about my company. We've reported you to the police." Hearing this, Peter's will to flee seemed to vanish. He looked up sharply, surprise and resignation flickering in his eyes, then lay flat on the floor. The police who arrived on the scene arrested him, and he was put behind bars. We made sure he would never inherit anything from us, ensuring our estate would be safe from him. With this, Peter won't be coming near me, Henry, or Ashley for a while. Finally, a truly peaceful life is on the horizon. Ashley's expression, which had been shadowed for so long, is finally brightening. Up until now, her expression at work had always been stiff, and even when trying to smile for visitors, it seemed forced. However, lately, she seems to be genuinely happy, which reassures me. Though she has cut ties with Peter, due to work circumstances, she remains connected not only with me but also with Henry. Our roles may be slightly different, but now she's like a good work colleague. Originally being competent, I'm considering moving her from the secretarial department to learn about company management. Of course, I'll respect her decision, but she seems quite pleased with the idea, so it might not be a bad proposal. Once she acquires the qualities of a manager, I might entrust her with responsibilities even after I step back. I believe in her, as she's already earned the trust of other employees. Henry and I are preparing to hand over our work to capable subordinates. We're not retiring yet, but we've planned a world trip together. We're thinking of leaving the US for a while to see various sites. After all the turmoil we've been through recently, we deserve to spread our wings fully. We're looking through travel brochures together, eagerly anticipating the joy and happiness that await us in the future.